it's kind of an emperor's new clothes type situation. Like the minute somebody's like, "This is bullshit," and they are big and powerful enough, the whole thing might just come crashing down. I joked on Twitter before my account got eviscerated by Twitter. The NFTs were beanie babies for tech bros. You know, it's one thing to like assign an ownership to a piece of art, right? But it's another, like, some of the NFTs selling are just garbage. They're just complete ironic pieces of garbage.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Chatter. Today we are back with Houston Wade, who was, a fantastic guest last week. I believe we had you on.
Yeah.
Time flies when, we're talking about GME. So before we get started, I need to plug two things real quick. First of all, you can get 25% off podcast hosting with my host, Podium, if you follow the link in the description. And also, you can get 3 months free on Amazon Music. So anyone who is like thinking that streaming services are too expensive, go and get 3 months of free on Amazon. You don't have to like pay anything. Just sign up, set your timer, and then get 3 months and then cancel it again. Stick it to Amazon in the most minor way possible. So, Houston, we got you back to talk about GameStop once again in an exciting week with share recall, dark pool stuff going on. And also, you were kicked off Twitter after our last conversation. So, do you want to tell us just before we get started, like what actually happened? Because there's a lot of people asking me, was it? Yeah, sinister.
Reddit is convinced that there's some sort of conspiracy. I think I just triggered a bot that did not like my foul language. There was a Twitter thread that was making jokes about Italian food, starting with penne alla vodka and a girl getting carded for ordering it. And then someone joked, like, what would happen if she ordered puttanesca? And so I wrote, well, horse sauce will get you 5 to 10 years in some states, and which is the literal translation of puttanesca. And Twitter said that qualified as hate speech and deleted my 10-year-old account and my 10,000 followers. So if you want to follow me sneakily, there's a mustache account called The Wooston that it's available to follow.
Oh, that's fantastic. I saw the mustache, and that's like 100% is a Simpsons reference, right, to the Mr. Snub episode.
Yep.
Yeah, I loved it, man. I cracked up so hard when I saw it. So fair play. So no conspiracy, just Twitter's ridiculous algorithm looking for hate speech.
I appealed, so maybe someday a human being will look at it and give me my account back. Maybe. But until then, I'm starting from scratch.
Perfect reason. Yeah, perfect reason for wanting decentralized social media or based on a blockchain, because then they can't remove all your stuff. But so we're here to talk mainly about GME and then a little bit about your geology space things. So first of all, do you want to explain to us what a share recall is? I know it's been scheduled for 420 thanks to some legend in the GameStop board. Do you want to explain to us what it is and kind of what it means in this context?
Yeah, so the shareholders meeting for GameStop is in June. I can't remember the exact date in June, like June 16th, somewhere around there.
As far as I'm aware, it's the 9th.
Oh, yeah. And so in order to be able to qualify to vote, use your shares to vote, you have to be in physical possession of them. I use the term physical when we're talking about digital shares that trade back and forth. But if you are a big fund and you want the ability to vote for CEO or for the way that the company's going to largely head, you need to recall your shares. That means everyone who has borrowed your shares to short needs to find some and get them back to you and repay their loans. Otherwise, you don't have the ability to vote. And usually, when it comes to voting, most corporations don't seem to require to be a physical holder of those shares. There's oftentimes, when votes happen, corporations will see more votes than there are actual shares of their company, which is a good sign that there's been naked shorting going on. And there should only be 69 million ish shares that have voting power for GameStop. But my guess is even with the share recall, we'll see tens of millions of more voters than should be existing. So the share recall can trigger a squeeze of sorts in that these shorts have to go out, find the shares because they're being margin called essentially, and return them to their borrowers or their lenders. Sorry.
So we might all get a vote on the board in the board meeting. How many people do you think they're capable of hosting in one board meeting? Are they gonna let me vote on things with my one share?
I would love to see just every single pixel on my screen a different person. But
It'd be fantastic, wouldn't it?
it would
So
look like
there's yeah.
Seriously, it'll look like a Technicolor snow pattern for your television.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. Maybe it would look like one of those, images that's made of a whole bunch of other images. Maybe
Yeah, exactly.
if we coordinated it perfectly, we could get it to like draw a rocket or something.
All right, frames 69,000 through 420,000. You're wearing red. Yeah.
Yeah. That would maybe work. But so a lot of people have said that this should trigger a squeeze because the shares will be forced to buy back or to cover shorts because we have to find the physical share. So what you're saying is that that's not necessarily the case, and that's why potentially we haven't seen the sort of movement that a lot of people were predicting this week.
Yeah, I know Vanguard has recalled theirs. BlackRock hasn't yet. BlackRock has 9 million shares that they think they own. That should make a significant difference. So, one of the things I read earlier this week was that BlackRock hasn't done a recall because they're scared that not enough rules have passed through the DTC to protect them from liability if the squeeze goes bonkers and Citadel gets drained and the other members of the DTC have to pony up cash to help cover that. So I'm not sure. BlackRock maybe have some liability anyway, even if they don't recall, because Vanguard owns lots of shares. Other index funds and mutual funds own shares and want to be able to participate because GameStop right now is like the most bonkers stock you can own. Like, well, why wouldn't you want to be able to be like, okay, I want to vote on whatever they're going to be presenting to either make this thing rocket more or destabilize.
So a lot of the things that I've seen as well has been people talking about this idea of dark pool trading, and for me at least, I've been looking at it for about a month, trying to figure out how we can get screwed on this, and whether it's possible for whether if we're believing the theory that the hedge funds have not yet covered their shorts and they're hiding them through some sort of creative mechanism, and then we assume that they're trying to do a lot of trading in these dark pools, as people have put together various DDs on this. I'll link some in the description. So is it a possibility that they could use the dark pools to cover their shorts without ever touching the official market? Is that like a realistic possibility by your understanding?
I think there is a possibility there. My issue is I don't think the dark pool is trading legitimate shares. I think most of the legitimate shares are being held by the retail side, and the big funds have synthetics that have been generated as a result of lending out their shares. I think the dark pool is largely counterfeits. Because the volumes and the numbers being traded, there are days where 1 billion shares in the dark pool will bounce back and forth between these hedge funds, and that's just not possible. Like, I don't care how fast your trading computers are, there is still some human on the other side who has to do data entry, and there are clearinghouses that have to like balance these books, and I just don't think it's possible for the 45 million existing shares to have such high furious volume bouncing back and forth between these funds that that the dark pool market is legitimate. I feel that that it's mostly shenanigans in order to keep the price low for reporting at the end of the day. The dark pool is just one fund talking to
Hmm.
another fund, like saying, "Hey, I'll sell you this for this price," and that other fund's like, "Okay," and they just swap it back and forth. And it's it's one of those things that I think that ultimately Congress, the SEC, and the clearinghouses will probably have to address after uh, the MOAS, after the mother of all squeezes, uh, because it's not fair to retail traders if they don't have access to such markets, right? Like it's one thing
Hmm.
to be able to go onto Fidelity or Robinhood and trade a share, but if 99% of the market is unavailable to you because it's one giant fund trading with another giant fund on the IEX or something else, uh, that really hurts the retail trader if what they're doing really has no effect upon the price of a share, the value of the share. If Robinhood or Webull gets shut down for some reason because they don't have enough liquidity for their to make their trades, then all of a sudden only hedge funds get to trade on some market that they're only allowed on, and not retail traders like the IEX. Uh, I think in the future we're going to see rules come out about how these trades are done, how they're regulated, if they can be done. Uh, so the whole point of the over the counter market, the OTC, was that stocks that aren't on one of the big major markets like the New York Stock Exchange or the Nasdaq and such can still be traded. And but if you are taking shares that should be traded openly on the market and putting them in the back alleys of Wall Street, doing weird stuff with them, uh, that's sketchy.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the whole concept is a little. I still quite haven't got like my head totally around the idea of it. Like, do you want to give like an explanation of what the dark pools are from your understanding for anyone who's sitting here being like, what are they talking about?
Yeah, the dark pools are sort of one-on-one negotiations between two big funds, and uh, one may call the other and say, "Hey, I've got these. You want to trade?" And it could be trading for cash. It could be trading for other shares of stock in different companies. So I'll sell you two GameStops for one Microsoft, and they do some sort of swap that way. And the thing is that they don't have to report the prices they did these trades at until the end of trading day. So oftentimes you'll see uh, uh, the trading day finishes, and half an hour later, some huge spike of 1 million shares will appear in the after hours market, and that will be a dark pool reporting. But even
Hmm.
then, a lot of the OTC market never gets reported. It only gets reported in the OTC market reports days later. There was some great research done by someone last couple of weeks that was finding that Citadel had over 1 billion shares of GameStop that they were trading specifically on the OTC, and there were other funds that had hundreds of millions of shares as well that they were just trading back and forth and not reporting to Nasdaq at the end of the day every day. I'll try to find a link for you, and maybe you can add that to the your description of the video.
Yeah, that sounds shot. Like, they were trading like billions of shares again. Like, I
Billions.
still can't
Yeah.
get my head around like how this is possible because as we talked about last time and you kind of mentioned there is only estimated to be officially like 50 million shares or so in circulation, like
Yeah.
official share, like real shares. So how can it be that we're seeing the trading of billions, given that I don't know, the estimates vary as to how much retail investors actually hold at the minute, but it's definitely like a 10 million plus. So those shares aren't being touched. Technically, they
Yeah.
should be just sitting in the the broker accounts or whatever of all the retail investors, and then. So, like, where is all this coming from? Is it just like back and forth, high frequency trading? Is it like a stupid amount of synthetic shares, or what do you think?
Yeah, I would think it's probably these synthetics, these counterfeits being generated or being sold naked.
Mm.
Citadel is its own market maker. They can generate counterfeit shares whenever they want and sell naked. The idea behind these counterfeit shares was never to create such a gross mass of fake shares that it basically destroys the stock price of anything because there's such a glut on the market. And
Mm.
in the entire nature of this squeeze that we're in is that retail traders have gotten wise to it, and they're just refusing to let go of their own shares. So the market makers are trying to, I think, sell more naked shares in an attempt to drive it down, and we're just gobbling them up. So, how this dark pool OTC billions of shares trading generally affects the rest of us, I'm not like, if it's not getting reported, then how can it affect the price? If it is getting reported
Mm.
somehow, why isn't it affecting the price? So, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
whatever sketchiness is happening in the OTC with GameStop, I think is kind of weird, and I don't quite understand it myself. How can these
Mm.
billions of shares be bouncing back and forth, and why, and who's letting it happen, and how is it really affecting us? Are things I can't answer. I don't know.
No, I obviously there's a lot of unknowns here. I think
Yeah.
it's kind of, I don't know if it's just me, but the thing that I've really, perhaps it's this whole GameStop thing that's really sort of laying bare the amount of sort of fraud, corruption, sort of fugazi, just sort of thin air rubbish that the financial market seems to have become. And I haven't been looking at it long enough to know when that happened, but it feels like there's a real, almost awakening happening of realization of how corrupt not just this is, but I feel it feels like the world is like running on this ridiculous momentum. It feels like everything's like barreling forwards. I don't know, this is just me, like I could be totally alone in this, but with things like happening, for example, the Doge Coin rally going on right now, it
Yeah.
seems like all of the madness just continues to escalate. Like, the theory was that once Trump was gone, everything would calm down again, but this just seems to have gone on steroids. Like,
Yeah,
just the
no, it seems
madness
like
of the entire world.
everything is just a troll market at this point. Like, everyone's just doing things because it's funny to them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what it seems like, and like, people are like, oh, you can't just invest in memes, and I'm like, I don't know, it's going pretty well at the minute.
Yeah. I mean, there'll probably be a bubble to it, and
Hmm.
at the end, everyone's gonna just have a good laugh. I
Yeah,
lost $50,000.
yeah. I mean, this,
Like,
it goes like full circle to the Wall Street bets, like like loss poured ethos.
yeah,
What do you
and
think's actually happening with Dogecoin? Like, do you think this is a serious estimation of people thinking this could be like the future currency, or do you think it's just, yeah,
I mean,
a
I
bunch of
think it's as good as
memers?
any other. Think about like the psychology behind Bitcoin and the psychology behind Dogecoin.
Hmm.
There's 20 million Bitcoin that will only, that's all that will ever exist, right? So in the future, the likelihood of a single human being owning an entire Bitcoin is really, really low because there's 8 billion of us and counting, right? But there's 38
Hmm.
billion Dogecoin. So you can say, hey, I have 1,000 Dogecoin and I can buy something that's not just with like fractional shares of a coin. I can buy it with whole coins.
Hmm.
Uh, right now with Bitcoin, the average person can't afford $64,000 or whatever it is for a Bitcoin. And if they're going to do any transactions, it's with strange, obtuse, really long decimal points. And, you know, imagine like you go to a store and the store accepts Bitcoin, you want to buy a pack of gum, right? You're going to be like, okay, written on there's $1.29 for the pack of gum, or 0.0000000000512369412 Bitcoin.
Yeah.
that's just asinine. Like, the human brain can't comprehend or accept or even like seeing numbers like that presented to them. I mean, are we going to see scientific notation on all of the
Hmm.
prices of everything from this point forward? Because it's 5.219 times 10 to the negative seventh is the price of something. It's just silly. Like, it's easier to be like, you know, 4 Dogecoin, done. All right. So,
Hmm.
I think there's a psychological
Yeah.
aspect to it.
Hmm. I mean, I saw some people listing reasons why it still hasn't hit its peak yet because it hasn't been listed on Coinbase. It's getting some like updates to it. It's going to be like Dogecoin 2.0. I don't know exactly like the specifics of the update. And
Probably like makes
Elon
fart
Musk
sounds
is
when you
going to
use it or
put.
something. Yeah.
Oh my god, I hope so. I like,
Here you go,
but then
sir.
Elon Musk is going to put. He's gonna put like a literal Dogecoin on the literal moon, and I
Yeah.
saw the tweet, and I was like, he's 100% serious. Like this isn't a
Yeah.
joke either. And I saw that the thing we were talking about before as well. I saw this video, which again I'll put in the description, of Elon Musk saying that look that fate loves irony. And that Dogecoin was created as a joke, as like a joke cryptocurrency to be like, yeah, cryptocurrencies are all just a joke. I'm going to make the most memeiest, jokiest cryptocurrency you can imagine. And that it would make sense in our topsy-turvy 2021 world that would become one of the most like widely used and traded cryptocurrencies in the world. It's a
Yeah, why
based on a
not?
meme. Yeah.
Because we're just trolling each other because we have nothing else to do as a society.
Yeah, maybe that's actually just it. Maybe that's why cryptos have just exploded. We've
Yeah.
just realized like the whole thing is a troll, so we may as well pick the trolliest of things to invest in.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that's the direction NFTs are going. Is that we're just going to have, someone's going to make meme NFTs, and those are going to be what sells for $1 million. Is going to be like the little girl with her back to the burning house or whatever, or you know, super cats flying through the air. I don't know. And Chrissy's auction house is going to be stuck auctioning off like thumb drives with these things on it. Up next is Farting Bandit. Opening price is £500,000.
Yeah, man, it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, it's one of those things that I was having a discussion with a friend of mine the other night about. He was like, how can crypto be such a huge thing, and how can such like ridiculous things go for such huge amounts of money in the modern world? We were talking about like modern art or
Yeah.
any of like the collector's items that go for like millions more than they will ever like realistically be worth. And we were talking about how it's a sign of society just having too much money and time in its hands and just ultimately just spending it on frivolous rubbish.
Well, it's a lot of it. Well, there's two big reasons. One, money laundering, and two, tax
Yeah.
evasion. So
Mm.
I wrote an article on this on my blog years ago about how to launder money using gemstones. And let's say you are a member of the triad in Los Angeles, and you've got $30 million you have to get from Los Angeles to your boss in Hong Kong, right? If you try to transfer that $30 million, the government see it and they tax it and they figure out why you have $30 million. But if you go to Sotheby's auction house and you buy $30 million in gemstones, well, you take those gemstones, you put them on your wife, you take the loose stones, you make little rhinestones on your baby's jeans or something, and you buy a ticket to Hong Kong and you fly to Hong Kong. Well, you land in Hong Kong, take all those gems, take them to Christie's auction house in Hong Kong, and you sell them for 30 million bucks, and you just moved $30 million across international borders. If you want, I don't know, a Da Vinci painting, right? And you want to buy that Da Vinci painting, and you pay $120 million for it. What you do is, at least in the U.S., is you make a shed in your backyard, you turn it into a private art museum, a nonprofit, and you lend your painting every year to that museum. And so you get a gigantic tax write-off. The painting's worth a rental of $20 million a year. So you can write off $20 million a year every year. That painting hangs in your garden shed, which is a private museum nonprofit that you own and no one is allowed in, and you can appreciate your Da Vinci for as long as you want. And if you need the cash later, right? It's probably appreciated 15% a year, and you sell it for $200 million 10 years from now. So, you know,
Hmm.
these big auction houses are nothing but money laundering uh, uh, tax havens. So, you know, if you have somebody paying $70 million for an NFT, right, they're probably doing something sketchy with that. And that, the idea is I can take this NFT and I can send it via email somewhere else in the world and pick it up and drop it off, and somebody else can own it. And so, there's these new mechanisms to launder wealth across international borders, and I think that's why we're seeing all sorts of weirdness come out of these cryptocurrencies and NFTs. It's a strange world. I would love to benefit from it.
Hmm. I mean, get drawing then.
Yeah.
Like my
I need
friends,
I
my
need art
friend and I,
skill.
yeah, yeah. My friend and I's discussion was based basically around the idea as to whether this is like whether some people are buying these pieces of art, or what percentage of the people are buying the pieces of art, or whatever it happens to be, NFTs, modern art, any sculptures, whatever falls into that category that you can think of. How many of them are buying it thinking this is worth my investment because I think it's so beautiful? And how many of them are all, whether consciously or subconsciously, bought into the idea that we just have to all continue to say things are worth this much so we can continue this scheme of money laundering and tax evading?
Yeah. I think you're right. uh, it's kind of an emperor's new clothes type situation. Like the minute somebody's like, "This is bullshit," and they are big and powerful enough, the whole thing might just come crashing down. I joked
Mm.
on Twitter before my account got eviscerated by Twitter. The NFTs were beanie babies for tech bros. You know, it's one thing to like assign an ownership to a piece of art, right? But it's another, like, some of the NFTs selling are just garbage. They're just complete ironic pieces of garbage, and they're selling. I don't know if it's a joke or if it is like through money laundering or tax evasion or what have you. Because why would you pay $200,000 in Ethereum for that? For like the LeBron James dunking that sold for like several $100,000. It's a GIF that's been on the internet for years now. So why some random person making that into an NFT, like, I own that NFT? Well, I can go to Google Images. I can get that GIF anytime I want. Like, what makes that one so special?
Yeah.
You know,
Hmm.
like,
I'm not sure.
I
Like,
don't know.
yeah. Do you think it's the fact that we've had so much money printed over the past year, something like a fifth, my friend was telling me, of all US dollars were printed in the past year, and we've had like this monstrous like upward wealth transfer. Do you think this is
Oh
just
yeah,
the money finding ways to be stored,
yeah. It's happening in
that
all
doesn't
these
have anywhere else
markets.
to go?
Yeah,
Hmm.
the housing market right now in America, home buyers, people that want to buy a home to live in, are competing with wealth funds that are trying to figure out places to store their wealth. And, you know, uh, in the UK, you guys have seen what happens when people are like, "Oh, it's safe for me to buy houses and I can just keep my money there." And all of a sudden you have just vacant homes everywhere that aren't being rented out, that aren't, they're being sold for just ridiculous amounts of money. And
Hmm.
so if you are, you know, Jim and Jill, and you've got $100,000 you can put down on a house, and you're competing with a fund that's worth, I don't know, $1 trillion, you're not going to win that bidding war.
No,
That wealth
no.
fund is just, they're buying anything they can to sink their money into it. So it's just being held somewhere, because having that much cash on hand is
Hmm.
always dangerous.
Yeah. So, one of the reasons that I wanted to ask you back was because we said we would talk a little bit about some of your work in doing some of the planning you have for space exploration missions,
Yeah.
or maybe that's a poor way of categorizing it. So, what is it you're actually involved in?
Well, what my main focus was originally, like when I went to do undergraduate, was I was interested in the concept of space mining and uh, planning those missions, figuring out what machinery would be needed. So it's kind of along, I don't know, the engineering lines of what it would take to mine space. And when I got my most recent master's degree in space studies, it kind of changed because I started looking at the laws behind it and realizing that without significant international negotiations and a new space treaty, we're basically going to foment a space war that is completely inconceivable for us today. Um, so now I'm kind of on the side of trying to lobby, the United Nations, the United States, Russia, China, Japan, and get them back to the bargaining table to negotiate a new space treaty. The big glaring loophole we have is that the current space treaty was written in 1967 before anyone ever landed on the moon, before we realized the wealth in space. And what that treaty meant was Russia and the United States are battling each other to get to space, to land on the moon first, and just kind of have the bragging rights. But at the same time, we didn't want an accident to happen where our astronauts had to bail and they landed in Russia and Russia arrested them as spies or enemies of the state and they got stuck in a gulag. And Russia didn't want the same thing. They didn't want their cosmonauts landing in American waters or American land and all of a sudden be taken prisoners. So the law broadly states that anyone who goes to space, while they're in space, they are considered a diplomat. They're an envoy of peace, meaning they can't be tried by a foreign state. Just like a diplomat, can get 1,000 parking tickets in New York and they never have to pay them because they got diplomatic immunity. So I want you to imagine now Jeff Bezos goes to the moon, right? And he's mining a bunch of helium-3. You've got, I don't know, Planetary Resources mining asteroids for gold. You have Elon Musk, for some reason, on Mars dying from percolate poisoning. And you have everyone else out there, we'll have entire markets collapse due to the vast infinite resources of space. I mean, one iron asteroid that's a mile across has something like $40 trillion in gold, right? So, there'll be no reason to mine Earth anymore. That's it. Like the 900 million people on Earth that are in resource extraction won't have a job. That's it. They won't, because there's no reason to dig really expensive holes on Earth when you can get all these resources from space much cheaper and in bulk. We won't have a hydrocarbons market anymore because the helium-3 on the moon in 20 years will supplant all of our power resources. One fuel truck of helium-3 can power the entire United States for a year. So the moon has 10,000 years of energy for every single human being to have American consumption levels of electricity. And that's right now, 500, I think, quintillion dollars in energy. Jeff Bezos will own us if he gets to the moon and starts mining that stuff. Like, we think Amazon's big. Blue Origin is going to be gigantic. Like, buy Blue Origin stock when that sucker goes IPO, because they're going to own everything. But think about this. So we have all this action going on.
Not financial advice, but
yeah. Our initial astronauts, they're Captain Hero of the Air Force. He's going up there doing experiments and whatever. In the future, it's not going to be Captain Hero of the Air Force. It's going to be some poor person from a favela in Brazil who's promised a fortune. They're going to go in space for 6 months and then die of a weird cancer from solar rays. So we're going to have multinational companies operating in space with a multinational workforce, and all of them are going to have diplomatic immunity. It's going to be a Wild West of proportions we could never expect. You can't try any of them. You can't arrest any of them. You can't prosecute any of them. They can do whatever they want. And, if Russia's entire economy is based upon, metals and hydrocarbons, and all of a sudden they have no market, but they've got a hell of a military and a really large space program, they can become entire space piracy state. They can go to space, steal Jeff Bezos's gold from an asteroid, and there's nothing Jeff can do about it because Russia's not going to prosecute itself, right? So, you know, we're going to be facing the
Yeah.
weirdest diplomatic rows and wars and spy programs, and it's going to be totally shady without creating uh, claim systems, without creating like a space police force and a space judiciary. It sounds so weird to say that. Like, I'm a space cop, I'm going to arrest you and take you to the space
Yeah.
prosecutor who's going to space charge you in front of a space judge. But like, we're going to need that in the future.
Look, as long as you don't get the rooster lawyer from Futurama, you'll be
Yeah.
fine.
I'll say, well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, sometimes like the numbers that you're throwing at me are just blowing my absolute mind. Like, like a truck of H3 could power the United States for how long did you say? Why on
A
earth?
year.
What is H3? What a
Helium
year?
3,
What is
He3.
H3?
It's
Yeah,
an
what is
isotope of helium. It has normally helium has 2 protons and 2 neutrons. He3 has 2 protons and 1 neutron, and
okay?
at fairly reasonable energy levels, we can fuse these 2 helium isotopes into something else, and that releases a tremendous amount of energy. Uh, the problem is that on Earth right now, we only have about 25 kilograms of helium-3 because we get all of our helium bubbling up from inside the Earth. We find weird gas pockets, and then we can take the helium out of that and make party balloons and watch it float into space and never come back. But the moon is full of helium-3. The sun produces it as a result of the nuclear reactions within the sun, and they just are flowing out from the sun 24 hours a day for the last 4.5 billion years. And it's raining down on the moon and raining down on Earth. But the problem is that the helium-3 hits the Earth's atmosphere and bounces off and disappears. When it hits the moon, there's no atmosphere, and it just kind of statically bonds to the dust in the moon. So for the last 4.5 billion years, the moon dust is just full of the statically bonded helium-3 that has nowhere to go. And in the 1960s and 70s, when we landed on the moon, we discovered just how much there was and realized what it could be used for. And some of the first big projects NASA did was basically calculate the ore load of the moon and helium-3 and realized that there's millions upon millions upon millions upon millions of tons of this stuff. So the missions that China is doing to the moon, that the India Japan consortium, Jeff Bezos in the U.S., all those lunar missions are meant to establish eventually mining operations on the moon, because whoever controls the moon will control global power basically for the next 10,000 years.
Right, you've made me a lot more terrified about our need to get to the moon now before the Chinese.
Yeah. We
That's
should
quite
have never built the
terrifying.
International Space Station and just gone to the moon to mine stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it feels like a video game. First we got to get the space station, then we got to get the next step and the next step. I mean, I'm looking forward to. I'm talking to Eric Berger, who wrote the book, a book about SpaceX. I'm speaking to him next week, so that's going to be a really fun interview. I guess we'll get to talk a lot about this sort of stuff. But so I know America has their like Space Force thing that they've created for this very reason. I didn't realize just how pressing the need to have that was. I feel, the memes were still amazing with Trump and his Space Force thing. But yeah,
the Space Force, like, part of the 67 treaty is that no one's allowed to militarize space. That doesn't mean they haven't. I have no doubt that superpowers have weapons in space that are secret and they're not telling anyone about. But what mostly these satellites in space are they're called dual use. So it might be a satellite that's taking pictures of stuff, it's a spy satellite, whatever, but also has like a pair of, I don't know, pincher claws on it. So if a Chinese satellite gets too close, you can go by and just chop the solar panels off of it, or maybe a can of spray paint, and it can spray paint over the solar panels so that these satellites just die. These dual use satellites, they can also be masked as repair satellites or refueling satellites. And just imagine them like an auto mechanic. An auto mechanic can fix your car or destroy it in ways you could never imagine, right? So there's probably a
Hmm.
lot
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
these dual use satellites up there floating around that are technically not military satellites, but they can easily be militarized. Uh, and the Space Force, the idea behind the Space Force is that it takes the space operations of the Air Force and puts it into its own distinct branch of the military, so that there's just these guys dealing with things in space, and the Air Force can focus on jets and I don't know, helicopters or whatever the Air Force does. And
Yeah. Tracking
it
UFOs.
it is a joke meme because it just seems like we're not used to actually sci-fi being real. Like when we
Hmm.
start
Yeah.
mining space, it's gonna still seems totally surreal to us that like we're getting rocks from space and it's making people trillionaires and they have more power than we could ever imagine, and all of a sudden, the plot to the Expanse is real. And uh, we we will need, these military forces to deal with this stuff. The problem is that right now the treaties don't necessarily allow it to happen. Um, and enforcement is impossible. In my master's thesis, I joked about a fictitious Elon Musk type character who, uh, let's say, he's got a contract with NASA for Falcon 9 rockets or something similar, and
Hmm.
the rockets keep blowing up, and there's a problem, and they lose their contract. Well, this billionaire might get really pissed and say, you know what, screw you. I'm moving all my operations to Libya. Libya never signed the Outer Space Treaty. I can do whatever I want. I can land on the moon and claim the moon for me. What are you going to do about it? It's going to cost you $1 trillion to figure out how to get me off the moon. And you don't have that money and time. And by then, I will have flooded the world with helium-3 and I'll be richer than all the nations put together. And, without having a coherent space policy for all nations on Earth, uh, we can run into all sorts of loopholes and shenanigans and problems that I can't even conceive of what all of the issues will be.
Yeah. Yeah. So, how would you propose? You mentioned you're going to the UN. How would you propose that we try and deal with or what sort of framework would you say we need to put in place in terms of how we allocate resources coming out of space? Because as you've mentioned, things would I think, what do you say, quintillions of dollars worth of stuff
Yeah.
is in space. And the other question I had was, will that mean that resource will just become so abundant that the price will go to almost zero because there's so much of it available? Like,
Yeah,
will that
kind of.
help sort of weigh out the sort of, yeah, the stupid amount of wealth that someone might accumulate? Like, say, because obviously our prices on Earth are based on how much it costs to harvest or mine whatever resource or gas that we're talking about. And as soon as it's like infinitely abundant, that should hopefully push the price down, maybe.
Uh, I foresee there's probably going to be a cartel of some kind. Kind of like De Beers and the diamonds.
Hmm.
Diamonds are not rare. I can go to Colorado and in a day have several carats of diamonds, just suck them out of the ground for pennies. Um,
Hmm.
but what the cartel does is they reduce supply. So if I go to Colorado and I make a really big mining claim, all of a sudden I have weird Dutch secret agents trying to assassinate me and destroy equipment because they want to maintain, the relative scarcity of their resource. And um, in the asteroid belt, there's enough iron in the asteroid belt that at today's prices can make every human being on Earth worth $100 billion. That's how much iron there is just in the asteroid belt. Uh,
What if I want it in Dogecoin?
Yeah, exactly. I want all the Dogecoin and yeah.
Yeah.
So the historical examples we have are the claim system, the mining claim system. When gold was discovered at Sutter Mill in California in 1848, right at the end of the Mexican American War, it resulted in this rush of 300,000 people moving across the continental United States into the wilds to get as much gold as they can. The United States had no presence in California until like 1851. So about 2.5 years of lawlessness. There were mining camps in California where the murder rate was higher than than any death rate of any battlefield of World War II. We're talking like 1 in 60 people will get murdered in a
What?
year. Yeah, because there was no law. There was no
Right.
police. There were no lawyers. There were no courts. There were like, I think, less than 1,200 Navy sailors stationed in San Francisco hanging out, and they weren't the law. They were just probably getting drunk and going to brothels. Um, and so it took until 1851 till the first marshal was in California. But what the communities there did was they adopted the Spanish system for mining claims, and it was kind of a, a I don't know. You might have military, it might have posses, but for mostly it was on the honor system. I stake this section of a river. It's mine as long as I mine it. If someone jumps this claim, I'm entitled to kill them, and that was kind of how it worked. Oftentimes, people would get
Hmm.
killed, and then their claim would get jumped. But that system proceeds to today in many nations around the world, U.S., Canada, uh, uh, I'm not sure who else, in Mexico, but this this claim system will have to probably be applied to space, and it'll probably have to be something where you can't stake a claim until you're on it, and when if you're on it, you have to be working it, so that to keep some company from saying, "Oh, I own these 5,000 asteroids, I got claims on all of them." Well, if you aren't mining those 5,000 asteroids, no, you don't have claims on them, uh, and that will
Okay.
help probably keep lawlessness to a minimum, and probably help maintain a competitive market for these minerals. But at the same time, who's going to have the resources to mount these expeditions? It's going to be Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and large governments like China, Japan, India, Israel's trying to get in there, the European Space Agency. Uh, so it's not going to, like, I'm not going to be able to make a claim on an asteroid worth trillions of dollars and then mount my own expedition to it. I don't have the money for that unless GameStop really moons, and then maybe I can. Uh,
Maybe
but
we should do that. We should all pool our money together
yeah,
to.
make a space company. I'm for it. If any other GameStop people out there want to make a space company with me after this moons, let's do it. Take them all on.
Yeah, I'm in. It should be great. So yeah, there's so many questions I have about this. Just it's so crazy to even like actually be talking about it seriously. Do you know what I
It's going to
mean?
get
It's
weird the
so
next 20 years for sure.
yeah. I mean, like hopefully we do it right. Like, what are your like estimations on how humanity is going to handle this?
Poorly.
Yeah, I was afraid of that. Like,
Yeah, you know, we tried to make a new moon treaty in the 70s, and only 5 nations signed on to it, and none of them were countries capable of going to the moon. Uh, so you know, I it's the human condition to not do anything until the shit hits the fan. We just, the stock market's the same way. We ignore everything until there's like an insurmountable problem. Then we go, oh no, and then we make rules. Um, we're just not very proactive. We're not going to do anything about climate change until it's destroying our entire planet, and we're not going to do anything about a new space treaty until 1 million space settlers are wiped out with a space laser by some space pirate. Like we're just not we're not proactive in that way. So I don't see us.
hmm.
I'm fully capable of being the Cassandra and being like, oh no, there's warnings, don't do that, and then no one listens to me until it's too late. I felt I was kind of that way last year with the coronavirus. Back in January, I was writing articles showing the statistics of what was going to happen with the coronavirus. People kept telling me I was a fear monger, and then like 2 months later, the entire globe shut down. And I was like, I did the math, I showed it to you.
Yeah, yeah,
Why would people
yeah.
listen?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I often wonder about that on many different topics. Is there how much talk or sort of consideration is there in like space circles, or people who are working on this about the like the need for a new treaty? Like, is it something that's talked about
Almost
within your
none.
industry at least?
Uh, In passing, it's mostly the United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs. For years, they've been trying to get people on board to create a new treaty, but you know, the fears of the big space powers is that if they sign a treaty, they're going to lose out on something. And
Mm.
their entire concept is if we get there first, we control it. And they think that they will be able to manipulate markets and people enough that they'll be able to control this resource and no one else will be able to have at it. The reality of that is that someone will find a way, and the fact that everyone who goes to space as a diplomat means they can do whatever they want to you in space and there's nothing you can do about it. And so, you know,
I mean, look what they do
I
on Earth.
foresee. Yeah. I foresee a future where, we have colonies in space, and these colonies in space are mining resources for us. They go for a generation or two, and all of a sudden they're like, screw you, Earth. Why should we be giving you all of our helium-3 and powering your economy, and all that money goes to Jeff Bezos' great grandkids? Screw you. I, we control it now, and we see colonial revolts. I mean, the United States, it took what a little more than a generation for the United States to give a big finger to their colonizers in England. It doesn't take long at all for a colony to be like, no, we aren't part of you anymore. We're our own thing, and we'll see that in space as well. I think space treaties will probably
Mm.
have to make permanent colonies maybe illegal, so that each human being only has a set amount of time they're allowed to be in space in a lifetime, like 6 weeks. You're allowed 6 weeks in space, and that's it, no more. In order to maintain that these population centers, these mining colonies, uh, remain loyal to Earth as a planet, and a community. Uh, Plus, there's all sorts of
Mm.
weird physiological things that will happen to people that grow up in low gravity environments that they're going to be stuck on the moon and never be able to come back. And it's I don't know.
Yeah,
I would say
yeah.
one of the
I've
solutions
read a
might
fair amount
be,
of that
yeah,
anti-gravity, or well, sort of like artificial gravity work, which I know people are actually working on quite seriously. So
yeah,
that perhaps they could figure out some way of making like a gravity, like an
yeah.
Earth-like
The
gravity
physiological problems of
hub. I don't
space
know.
are many. I mean, you have guys like Mark Kelly and Scott Kelly that go up the space station for long periods of time, and you lose 5% of your bone density every month you're in 0G permanently. They basically get osteoporosis by going into space long term, and you never get that bone density back. Uh, your circulatory system is relegated upon being in a gravitational environment. So if you have no gravitational environment going on, your spinal fluid floods into your brain and fills your skull with spinal fluid and causes your eyes to bulge and flatten. So you end up going blind eventually. Uh, you can
Oh
have all
shit.
sorts of atrophying from your muscles not being used in the proper way. They try to combat this up in the space station by putting bungee cords on people and making them run so they can still maintain some sort of like core strength. But even then, when they land
Mm.
after a week or two in space or more, they have to be met with wheelchairs and physical therapists and doctors. Uh, so maintaining the physical form in space for long periods is really challenging. Um, One of the things we learned in space studies is, a mission to Mars will take, with current technology, 6 months to a year to get there. During that entire time, those people their muscles are atrophying. They're losing 5% of their bone density. They're going blind. They're having cranial problems, circulatory problems. They're getting bombarded with cosmic rays that are just insane. Titanium atoms flying the speed of light, just piercing your DNA, right? Just horrible stuff. And then you land on Mars, which all of a sudden you're in a gravitational environment, and you're just going to break a hip. Like, it's, you aren't going to be met with a team of doctors. You aren't going to be met with physical therapists or a wheelchair. You're going to be suddenly in a gravitational environment for the first time in 6 months, and bones are going to break. You're going to be fatigued, and then you're going to be met with this in the soils, the stuff called perchlorate, which is chlorine molecules that are highly toxic to the human body. They attack the thyroid and shut down your entire immune system. And so, 24 parts per billion on Earth is considered hazardous and can really do damage to a person. The Martian surface is 1% perchlorate. The only way to reduce that number and turn that perchlorate into chlorides is to flood the entire planet with anaerobic bacteria. And we have to wait thousands of years for the Martian soil to be safe enough for us to like plant our potatoes and grow things. Until then, it's completely toxic. And there really isn't any economic resources on Mars to mine and make money. So, I look at SpaceX plans and NASA plans to go to Mars, and I'm just like, why? There's so much more money to be made that kind of serves an economic purpose than Mars. Mars is just going to be like $1 trillion snuff film that we'll end up watching, and we're just going to lose a lot of money at it. That's kind of how I see Mars.
We have to go for the obelisk. The obelisk.
Yeah.
We got to go and meet the Galactic Federation, who are waiting for us off planet until we all wise up and stop being so crazy. That's what the Israeli Space Agency, or the former head of the Israeli Space Agency, said, I think. Or was it the Israeli Space Agency, or was it their intelligence agency? I don't remember. Anyway, Houston, this has been a fascinating chat. It was great to talk to you about space and whatnot, because that is truly mind-blowing, but it's fascinating and exciting. And since I've been listening to Star Wars soundtracks all week while I've been working, it seems quite apt. Everybody follow Houston on Twitter. Check out my sponsors in the link in the description below. Links for all the stuff we talked about is there. And yeah, thanks a lot, man.
Thank you. It's been so much fun. Let's do it again.
Yeah, let's do it again sometime. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, follow me on Twitter, or sign up to our mailing list. Thanks a lot to our sponsor, Expressvpn, the #1 most trusted VPN. Get lightning fast connectivity with servers in 160 locations across 94 countries. Keep your browsing privacy safe with Expressvpn, and get a 35% discount on 12 months of Expressvpn when you follow the link in the description below. Don't forget, my book is now out and available to order on Amazon and on bookshop.org. That's Brexit, the Establishment Civil War. And most importantly, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.